Welcome to Get Real, How to Live a More Authentic Life, with psychologist and author of over 75 books, Dr. Barry Weinhold. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Get Real, How to Live a More Authentic Life with Dr. Barry Weinhold. My name is Ben Barber. Dr. Barry, how are you today? How are you feeling?
I'm just a little bit careful today. I had something happen last night that just sort of got me gone. At 10 o'clock last night, the doorbell rang, and there was this scraggly looking, it was actually a young man at my door, and he said, my cell phone died. Can I come in and charge my cell phone? Boy, the red flags went off right away. So I said, no, I'm sorry, I can't help you. And he left. He said, okay, and left. But I'm more careful. I had somebody was supposed to come last night, and they didn't. And I had left the front door wide open for them, and then I forgot to close it. So I'm going to be more careful from now on when I know there are people in the neighborhood looking for something bad to happen.
That's scary. That is, I'm glad that you're being more careful, because that is terrifying, and that is absolutely a red flag. And you did the right. That is absolutely right. You did the right thing there for sure. So let's talk about it today. Today we're talking about mass violence.
Right.
Obviously, there's no reason to ask why we're talking about mass violence. It's literally every day when you turn on the news, there's something new. But what are you?
Well,
what are you thinking here today? What inspired today's topic?
Well, it goes back to July 4th.
Yeah.
And I'm working for BetterHelp, and I decided, since I have international clients, I'll just keep that day open and get some clients from other places where July 4th isn't a holiday.
Yeah.
So I did. But one client had signed up, and then he canceled. So I had a break between clients. And I thought, well, gee, that's unexpected. What can I do? I looked at my emails. I had taken care of all them. And then I think I'll just go out and look at TV for a little while and relax between sessions. So I turned on CNN, only to find all the news about the parade shooting in Highland Park, Illinois. And I thought, oh my God, how many times do I have to turn on the TV and find out there's another mass shooting? It just seems like every other day. And it hit me harder because I know some people who live in Highland Park. And I mean, they would describe it, and I would too, as probably one of the safest places in the country. So if one of the safest communities in the country isn't safe anymore, where is it safe?
Right.
And so I said, well, why doesn't somebody figure this out? And I got angry, and I started pacing across the room thinking, what am I going to do with this anger I have here? And so I said, I got to channel it into something positive. So what can I do? As one person, what can I do? So I said, well, I can do a podcast episode on mass violence and my ideas about what causes it and what we might think about doing about it. So that's what led to today's episode, was that. Plus, I also realized, after I did my thinking about what I was going to say today, that I have some real doubts about the effectiveness of the mental health system. And I'm going to talk about that on the second episode.
Yes.
And so that's 2 episodes that came out of one morning of turning on the TV.
Well, it was a big morning for sure, and these are things that we need to talk about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We absolutely need to talk about them, the less that we talk about them, the more that they're going to happen.
And the other thing I'm going to do with the second thing about the mental health system is I'm writing a new book, and it's called How to Tame Your Inner Demons Through Self-Therapy. And I'm going to share with the readers of that book everything that I've ever learned about what was effective in being a therapist. And I'm just going to share that with them and say, here, take it and use it. And here's how you become your own self-therapist. Don't even bother with the mental health system today, because it isn't going to really help you tame your demons, unfortunately. I'll talk more about that in the next session, but that's the other thing that I ended up deciding to do. And then long term, I'm going to create another online course for therapists on how to deal with childhood trauma, which is where the demons start. And so I've got maybe out of that one morning, I got about 3 years of work to do on that topic.
So let's talk about mass shootings, mass violence in general, gun violence, and the people that do it, and their inner demons, and they're obviously troubled people. You know, well, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I mean, first of all, the focus on gun violence may be in the wrong place. It's focused on the guns and taking the guns away from people. And I don't think that's the answer to the problem. The problem is that guns don't kill people, people do. And we have to look at that. Why would somebody take the life of another human being? Well, obviously, they have inner demons that are controlling them. And many of those inner demons came through experiences they had growing up. And I'm going to, at the end of this episode, give you a case study that's well known about somebody whose inner demons took over and caused him to do some very destructive things. So anyway, I do think that the whole scenario is that there are perpetrators of violence, there are victims of violence, and then there are bystanders. Now, in the Highland Park incident, there were a number of very trained professional bystanders who did nothing. Apparently, this young man had threatened suicide. The parents called the police came, and they then didn't do anything. I mean, with somebody who's that suicidal, the standard protocol is to put them in the hospital for 72 hours and have a psychiatrist examine them to make sure they're not a danger to themselves or other people. That didn't happen. And then a second time, less than, I think a year and a half later, the police were called again because he was now threatening to kill everybody in the house. So the police came again, and that would have been another time when they should have said, hey, this guy is dangerous and he needs to be locked up for 72 hours so we can evaluate and then decide what to do with him. So the system failed. The bystanders who were supposed to really protect us didn't do their job. And that happens to be not just the police departments. I mean, there's another case that came to my attention with this guy by the name of Bo Savage. Interesting name, 35-year-old who went into his house and with a AK-47, I think, or a AR-15, I don't know which, a semi-automatic weapon, and shot his wife, his 13-year-old son, and her mother. And the tragedy about that is that here's what his wife wrote before this happened. She said, I filed a divorce today after dealing with my husband's affair. He became verbally violent, and he keeps throwing his fist like he's going to hit me and calling me names. And he told me I will need a protective order because I have no idea what I just started. In other words, what he's saying is my inner demons are now in control of me, and I don't know what I'm going to do. So she also added, she said, he has mental health issues. He quit taking his meds, which means he must have seen a mental health person who did nothing but give him meds, did nothing to tame his inner demons. And recently he purchased a firearm that is concerning to me. He keeps saying he's going to blow his brains out, and I don't want my safety and my son's safety in jeopardy. So she went and filed for a protective order to keep him away, and it was denied. And 2 days later, she was dead. Now the system failed her again. So we have this kind of these systems that, I mean, I have a former colleague of mine, a former client of mine, who called me and said her 18-year-old son threatened to go to school and shoot everybody. She reported it, and they did nothing, absolutely nothing. And I mean, those are kind of, when somebody says that, that's something you pay attention to.
Yeah, it absolutely is. Why do you think that the mental health system in America has gone so wrong?
Well, I want to wait to talk about that more
Okay.
in the second episode. I want to talk now about what are these inner demons that these killers have.
Yes.
And where do they come from? And that's I think that'll take us to the end of this one. But I think I mean, most of these people are sociopaths or psychopaths. But what causes people to become sociopaths or psychopaths is my question.
That's a really good question. I hope that you
they're not born with that, although, you know, I had a client who came to me and said, I was born evil. What can I do? And I thought, wait a minute, what am I going to do with this one? And he said, I even talked to my rabbi, and he said, yeah, you're right. You were born evil. And I said, well, let's call that a hypothesis. And let's see if there are other hypotheses that we could generate that might have equal validity. And so we generated the alternative philosophy or hypothesis was that he might have experienced some things that caused him to feel like he was evil, and that his inner demons were now, he was listening to them who were telling him that. And eventually my hypothesis won out over his. And he gave up the hypothesis, or what he had thought and had been told, even by a clergy, that he was born evil. So my read is that people are not born evil. It's what happens to them, and often during infancy, that causes this. That most of the psychopaths, and the research and the literature that I've read says that most psychopaths are created in the first year of life. That there's something happens in that first year that sets them on a place where everything in their life is now reversed. And so good looks like evil, and evil looks like good to them, actually. And so they act in a reverse way. And they also, I mean, what we know from the research about early childhood trauma is that template that's set in the first year, the first 9 months, actually, is the template that is the basis for the rest of our lives. That's what we then base our life on. Basically, what happened to us in that first 9 months in our bonding and attachment process. And if there was something went wrong with that, and there's no way that people even understand that and do anything about it, that's what will direct their lives for the rest of their lives. And that brings me to probably one of the premier case studies about that. And that's Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber. Do you remember him?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
How could you forget the Unabomber?
I know. And he was studied quite a bit. And he was a highly gifted child. I mean, and like many gifted children, he was teased and bullied and verbally abused, mostly by the jocks in school. There was a group of them, of gifted kids, that they called the briefcase boys, because they always came to school with a briefcase. And so that was one kind of trauma that he dealt with. And then the other one was, and a little bit background of Ted. First of all, he had an IQ of over 170.
Oh, wow.
He graduated from high school when he was 15. He was admitted to Harvard and graduated from Harvard with a degree in mathematics. He then got his PhD from the University of Michigan, and he became the youngest assistant professor to ever teach mathematics at the University of California at Berkeley. So that looks like somebody who's being very successful. And yet inside of him were inner demons that he never tamed, and they just kept haunting him for the rest of his life. He had trouble at Berkeley because he couldn't relate to the students. And I believe he thought he saw them and projected on them all the things that the students who teased him in high school said, because they looked at him as sort of a kind of a weirdo, and he was so wrapped up in mathematics that he couldn't relate to students and their issues, and he eventually quit because of that. But basically, the major trauma in his life was when he was about 2 months old. He developed an allergy, a rash, probably what would they call it? Let's see, they called it hives. He had hives. And so they put him in the hospital for a week. Now, why would you put a baby in the hospital for a week because of hives? I have no idea. But that was a huge bonding break at 2 months. His mother was not allowed to come to the hospital to visit him during that time. And she says this, she said, Teddy is the way he is because he had a bad case of hives that caused him to be hospitalized as a child for a week. They did something to him during that week he was hospitalized that made him the person he grew up to be. She couldn't see him in the hospital, and she said when he was released, he was a changed baby. So that's a huge bonding break, and many of the histories of not all of them, but many of the histories of serial killers and mass murderers, there's some kind of a incident in their earliest infancy like that, and basically what they do is they grow up without a conscience, and by age 2 or 3, children like that often threaten to kill their parents, and parents have to lock their bedroom doors at night, and there is a treatment for that, and that's to force them to bond with their mothers. They go to therapy, and the therapist forces them to sit in their mother's lap and be held and bond with that person, and they scream and yell and kick and do everything they can to avoid it. But that therapy has now been outlawed, which is the only therapy I know that works with these people. And then the person I talked to about this, who wrote a book, Ken McGid, called Children Without a Conscience, said that the only other treatment that you can do with these people is when they're adolescents, you have to warehouse them. There's no other treatment. And then he said, the danger is that if enough of these children grow up without a conscience, they end up in high places in business and politics, and they end up in leadership roles because they're often very charismatic. And he said, soon, if we're not careful, there'll be more of them than us. And that was a prognostication that seems to be coming true. There seems to be more and more and more people like that in our society and in high places who are doing crazy things. So Ted Kaczynski, in fact, he said in an interview that basically he said, I have a good deal of anger in me, and there are lots of people I would like to hurt. That's his inner demons speaking. And he never dealt with that. he never dealt with that. And so what ended up doing was he bitterly blamed his parents for everything. And, I often tell my clients, in working on your issues, you have two choices. You can either blame your parents and be angry at your parents, or you can grow up. And if you're interested in growing up, I can help you. If you're interested in the first, I don't have anything I can do to help you. And Ted chose the former. He blamed all of his life, his whole life, he blamed his parents for everything that happened to him, including, and how it controlled his behavior is, while he was in the hospital, he was isolated from his mother. And what did he do for the rest of his life? He isolated himself. He built a little cabin in the backwoods, didn't even have running water, and lived there the rest of his life until he was caught after his, sending bombs to people. So, it's really a case where that template that was set at 2 months ruled his life, and those inner demons that he had ruled his life. And he turned out to be, he could have been a genius. In fact, he won a number of awards for his work in mathematics from various mathematical associations. So he was brilliant, but he was tormented by inner demons that he could never tame. And it's a sad story, but I think we need to understand that many of these mass shooters have inner demons who are out of control, and they need the help of mental health people, because anyone that takes the life of another human being is out of control and is in control of has their inner demons in control of their life.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow.
And that's a fascinating. I know many people don't know that about Ted Kaczynski. They just know he was a criminal, and he made bombs and threatened people. But he suffered a huge bonding break at 2 months. And I imagine Ted was also a very sensitive man, and with that high IQ too, he probably absorbed those kind of things at a deeper level than most of us might. So I think there are a lot of factors involved, but the main factor is that no one ever helped Ted tame his demons.
Right. Wow. Yeah.
And that leads me to next week's.
I was just gonna say, how can we? I want to expand on this, because how do we not leave these people behind? How do we not, help them? And why is our current mental health care system so broken? And we don't have enough time to cover that question, because it's a very big, loaded question in this episode.
That's what I want to talk about next week.
So please come back next week. If you have any questions about any of this information, you can contact Dr. Weinhold at cicrcl.org. You can click the link in the description, and you can also find out all of the resources for any of the podcast episodes via the Google Drive link that's in there as well. Dr. Weinhold, thank you. This is a very heavy topic, and thank you so much for adding your years and years of expertise into this conversation.
Well, thank you, Ben. See you next week.
See you next week. Bye for now.
Bye.
For more information, please visit the Colorado Institute for Conflict Resolution and Creative Leadership at cicrcl.org, or click the link in the show notes.